بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق صدق الله العظيم. My respected friends, elders, brothers, mothers and sisters, currently in the Islamic world, there is such a great need for academic excellence. If one has to take a glance over Islamic history, one would find Muslims in the forefront academically throughout our history, whether it be medicine, whether it be geography, whether it be astronomy. Muslims were always in the forefront. Take architecture for an example. If one just has to look at the mesmerizing Sultan Ahmed Masjid, the Blue Mosque as we all know it, the Planet Palaces in Granada, the Taj Mahal, the Qutub Minar, all of these speak about Muslim excellence in architecture. So much so the Blue Mosque was built about 400 years ago. At that time, imagine what a marvel it would have been. During the course of the building and after people have started using it, a particular brick got loose in the Blue Mosque. So when it was taken out to be fixed, there was a letter that's there. And it said that if this brick is loose, it means so much of time has passed for the masjid being used. And from now on, the following things will need immediate intervention. You would need to do this, because that much time has elapsed. That architectural marvel, even in today's time, we don't have. It was built so amazingly that when one would put oil to burn the lanterns, then the soot that would come out from there would be collected in a particular place. And the architect then said that this should be given to the scholars, they can even use that as ink. So far we were in terms of what we were able to achieve. If one were to look at flight, then Al-Farnas was known to be the first pilot. If one were to look at medicine, then Ibn Sina would be somebody you would turn to. If one would look at travel, then you would look at Ibn Battuta. These are all people from the Islamic world. Contrasted with what we see today, we have mediocre achievements in our stuff. I was passing the school one of the days, and the learners were getting a report. And one learner said, "Hey, I made it. So I was inquisitive, what did you make? He said, "I got 55%, I passed." So we've made it as an achievement of passing, not an achievement of excellence. If we look at our discussions, our answers are shallow, our arguments are childish, we lack depth in our discussion, in our theory, we are based on satire websites and articles. This is what challenges us in our current discussion. Take Palestine for an example. We all know Palestine is an issue that needs great amount of Muslim attention. But how much do we know as an ummah? Why Palestine? What has happened? What was the Naqaba? What was the Intifada? What happened in 47? What happened in 68? How did this fashion itself? How much are we aware of what currently is transpiring? Satire websites and articles, they challenge the way we talk and the way we do things. There is such a great need for Muslims to take inspiration and leadership from scholars and people of the past. One can ask yourself, what is meant? What did the scholars achieve? What did they do? What were some of the things that the scholars went through? And there are two particular aspects I thought that we could touch on today's Jumu'ah. The quest for knowledge and the importance of reading. These are two extremely important aspects that we as an ummah need to get back to. If you just look at knowledge and the quest of knowledge, who from amongst us doesn't know the great Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari rahimahullah? We all probably would have heard of him. The Khatib on a weekly basis would quote the ahadith that appear in his kitab. Many people would say, but it's written in Al-Bukhari, hence I practice upon it. But what made Al-Bukhari is the question perhaps we can answer today. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, when they were writing the biography and they were looking at the teachers of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, it was numbered as over 1,000 were only his teachers. He drank well from more than 1,000 different teachers. That made Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. That gave him the diversity of views. That gave him the shoulder to stand on. To say that if I say something, I've drank water from the knowledge of so many wells, it equated to over 1,000 of his teachers. When they started gathering his pupils, those that had taken knowledge from him, those at whom had taken the sanad, the transmission of hadith, it is said Imam Bukhari rahimahullah had more than 80,000 students that drank from his well. This makes people leaders. When he wrote his book, perhaps you and I might open it occasionally, take a hadith and be inspired by it. But what made it such an accepted book of academic excellence? Asahhul kutub ba'da kitabillah, the most authentic book after the Quran al-Kareem. It is said that some of the ulama of the opinion, there is over 7,000 ahadith in Sahih al-Bukhari. Others are of the opinion there is over 9,000. Some have included the hadith that come multiple times, some haven't included it. Whether it's 7,000 or 9,000, he had chosen this from 600,000 hadith he knew of by heart. And every time he done one hadith that he made mention in his book, he performed a ghusl, he read 2 rakats of salah, and thereafter he authored his book. This would translate that Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, in his time, it took him 16 years to write the book. In 16 years, he would make ghusl 9,000 times. And he would read 18,000 rakats of salah. That academic excellence is what we have to strive to achieve. Sometimes it's cold, we make wudu maghrib time, we just barely make it to Isha. We don't want to break our wudu because it's cold to make his wudu again. Imam Bukhari made 9,000 ghusls only to ensure that the book is the best book that we would get. Then we would have academic excellence. Someone came to Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah, Imam ibn Qayyim Jawzi rahimahullah makes mention. And he said, Imam Sahib, tell me a person if he's a scholar, and if he knew 100,000 ahadith with the chain of narrators of by heart, would that person be able to give a juristic ruling? He said, no, he's not qualified to do so. So the person then posed the question again and said, well, if he knew 200,000 ahadith, would he be qualified to give Islamic ruling? He said he wouldn't be able to do so. He said, okay, let's up the level, let's up the momentum, let's increase the bar. If the person knew 300,000 ahadith, along with the chain of narrators, would that person be able to give an Islamic ruling? He said no. So the person said, okay, 400,000 ahadith, if the person knew it, would he be qualified to give a ruling? Then Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah done this, and he said perhaps he might be able to do so. So as scholars and as people of the ummah, we have the highest academic excellence that has been given us as an example from the Quran and Sunnah and from the lives of the pious. In the recent past, when India was then freed from the colonized Britain, and then they started their own parliament, then the first Minister of Education was a person by the name of Moulana Abul Kalam Azad. He was the first Minister of Education in the freed India after the colonizers Britain had left. So when he had passed away, he had made a bequest that my entire library that I have, I would like that this library be taken and be given to an institute of learning. So the nearest one was there was an institute called Nadwatul Ulama in a place called Lucknow. The librarian makes mention, he says, when this entire library came to me and I started now taking it so that I could archive it within the library and I could then start making a note of it, I counted 10,000 books that had come from the Minister of Education, Moulana Abul Kalam Azad. He said, but that's not the amazing thing of the whole aspect. He said, when I started looking at these books, I taken each book, now I need to document it, I need to ensure that I put it in the right, I categorize it within its topic. He said every book I've opened, the signature of Moulana Abul Kalam Azad was there. I read this book and I completed it on this day. I read this book and I completed it on this day. The librarian says, when I concluded all 10,000 books, archiving it and putting it in its right place, I found that Moulana Abul Kalam Azad, the first Minister of Education, read all 10,000 books in his library. So we have those people who aspired for great academic achievement that you and I need to work for. Let us take something more common. Now in the recent past, there was a Moulana, his name was Moulana Zarwali Hassan. He was from Pakistan. He would have what they would call a Dawratul Tafsir. A Dawratul Tafsir means that in the month of Sha'ban, when all the institutes closed, for out that 15 days, and in the month of Ramadan, they would do tafsir of the entire Quran Kareem within a period of 40 days. But from the 15th of Sha'ban, just till about the 25th of Ramadan, in that period of 40 days or so, they would have a Dawratul Tafsir. So the person would go and they would do the entire tafsir the entire day, obviously having breaks in between. So one of the students that were there, he happened to be one of the family members of Moulana. He said one year in the Dawratul Tafsir, I started jotting down only the references that Moulana had used within that period of teaching the Quran Kareem. So for an example, if he counted that Sahih Bukhari, this hadith is mentioned, I made a note of it. And all the kitabs that he used, at the end of the Dawrah, I realized Moulana had referenced in his tafsir of the Quran 1036 books that he had read. He had read 1036 books, of which he knew it of memory, that he would reference it while he was teaching the tafsir. These are the examples of academic achievement that you and I need to strive for. If we contrast it of what's happening today, it's that time of the year whereby we all know when it comes to the end, when the matrics now finish their educational syllabus for the year and they go into prelims, then it's known as that period of the year whereby it's the trashing of the school. What an indictment on the ummah and on the learners that they spend 12 years at an institute that teaches them everything that they know in terms of education. And the one thing they give back before they leave is they trash the school that taught them. Have we not realized that perhaps there's a greater requirement in education that we have lost our finger on the pulse? Perhaps if they're going just to a secondary school, from standard 7 or grade 9 right till matric, when they would be sitting there, they would trash the school to go back and they would say that's the legacy that we left. Scholars were never like that. Islamic education always taught us that when a person goes to any Islamic education to learn, the education reforms him. When we start wahi and revelation in the Quran Kareem, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of Iqra. Education and reading are made mention 6 times in the first revelation along with the creation of humankind. And for 3 years after that, there was no revelation. That the first revelation that lasted the longest, of which in the interim there was no other revelation, was that of the importance of education. For 3 years, that was the benchmark the ummah was left. The first word of revelation this ummah had got, and perhaps has lost, is the education of Iqra, read. That notion of reading as an ummah we have forgotten. Let's go through a few more examples in history. Currently, one of the senior scholars, Mufti Taqi Uthmani, he was the Chief Justice of Pakistan. He graduated as an alim, he graduated as a lawyer as well. He served as the Chief Justice. It is said regarding him, when his autobiography was written, he wrote his first article at the age of 15. At the age of 15, he wrote his first academic article. At the age of 16, his father's teacher, they were compiling all his rulings. So they asked him to compile a life story and a biography of his father's teacher at the age of 16. At the age of 17, he wrote his first book. And what was the contents of the book? The first book that he wrote at the age of 17 was on birth control. At that age of 17, where some of us don't know what is our vision for ourselves, you ask a person, you in the last part of your life, you're going to matric next year, you are in grade 11, what are you going to study? I'm not sure yet. At that age, we have a scholar that's writing a book on academics, on birth control for the ummah. So there's great amount of requirements for us to be able to further ourselves. The question is, where do we start and what do we do? We have the example. We understand that we need to up our game in this regard. Where do we start and what do we do? So there are 5 particular genres of reading that we need to do. 5 particular different aspects of reading that we need to imply in our life. Number 1, we have to read Quran al-Kareem abundantly along with a deep understanding of Quran. This has to become any person in history of Islam that has achieved anything. He had 2 salient qualities. The one, he used to read abundant Quran al-Kareem. And the second, he was very constant with his tahajjud salah. If a person has to do a cursory glance on all people of this ummah that have achieved anything, these are 2 qualities you will find. His great link with Quran and his reading of tahajjud salah. So for us, the first thing we need to do is abundant Quran al-Kareem and a deep understanding of Quran al-Kareem. What has Allah said? What incidents has Allah quoted? What lessons has Allah made mention of? And what are the things that we can bring in our life from Quran? This is an important thing we cannot overemphasize. The second is a deep understanding of seerah and the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What did the Nabi of Allah go through? What was his strategy? How did he deal with those that were close to him? How did he bring those that were hostile towards him closer? What was the way that the Nabi of Allah adopted with children? How did the Nabi of Allah go ahead with spread of Islam to the empires of the time? This study of seerah is something that is greatly recommended. For this, there are 2 books we can begin with. One is the Siratul Mustafa by Moulana Idris Kandhelwi rahimahullah. It's in 3 volumes and there is a concise version in 1 volume. If we start with this, it's an excellent beginning. And the other is Ma'abul Hasan Ali Nadwi rahimahullah has also written a seerah book, and that too, if we start with, both made for excellent reads. The third is the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. We have to understand what did the Nabi of Allah say to us as an ummah. And there are so many ahadith books that we can learn from. There are 2 that I would like to recommend. One is the Riyadus Salihin of Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, and one is the Adabul Mufrad of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, along with his Jami'ul Sahih, he had authored many other books, one in history, one of hadith, and then an Adabul Mufrad, just mannerism in Islam. If we can adopt the mannerism of Nubuwah and the mannerism of prophethood that Allah has given us, by Allah, we will see a change in the life of those people that interact with us. Number 4 is we have to read biographies of Islamic legends. This we don't do. We have to read biographies of great people in Islamic history. The likes of Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, Tariq ibn Ziyad, Salahuddin Ayyubi, Aurangzeb Alamgir, Hassan Basri, Abdul Qadir Jilani, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ashari, Izzuddin Abdul Salam, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, Nuruddin Zangi. There's so many people. If one only takes each one of them and takes a read of them. The book of Salahuddin Ayyubi rahimahullah, written by Allama Salabi, is in 3 thick volumes. If you just read them, one will get an understanding that when we speak of the conquest of Palestine, it is not a simple thing that Salahuddin Ayyubi done, but there was almost a 13-year-long battle only in his life. And then his ustad and his teachers, Nuruddin Zangi, and after that Imaduddin, all of them, what effort did they put? But we have to read biographies of people that achieved much in Islamic history. This will guide us. This will fashion us. This will give us leadership skills. This will empower us to be able to work differently in a society which the diaspora is changing. Which we see it happening around us. We need to start doing that. And the last thing that we need to do is we have to learn history. History is it's an amazing read. History of Islam in South Africa. How did we get Islam? History of Islam in Africa. When did Islam come? What were the do's and don'ts? What had transpired? And they said, مَا لَهُ وَمَا عَلَيْهِ. What was the pros? What was the cons? How did colonizers affect Africa? How did Islam spread in the world? What had happened? If we don't know our history, we're bound to make the same mistakes again. History is something that we must read. So once again, we're suggesting 5 different categories of books. Number 1, Quran al-Kareem, an abundant recital of Quran along with a very deep understanding of Quran al-Kareem. This will fashion our thinking, it will guide us. In this, there's a book called Ma'ariful Quran. Perhaps it is in our masjids also, it's easily available, or you could download the app for it. Every day read a little bit of it and see, it's in English, how much of in-depth understanding of Quran there is. See how much of knowledge there is in Quran. You know, it is said of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, there are 500 ayat of Quran approximately that speak of laws. The remainder ayat, they speak of Allah's greatness, the finality of Nabi alayhi salam, they speak of akhirah, they speak of the non-Muslims. But 500 of those got to do with laws in Islam. From these 500, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah extracted 80,000 different rulings from 500 ayat. That means from every ayat of ahkam, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah extracted 160 rulings per average. That is knowledge. That is what we have, the legacy that we have inherited from our past predecessors was knowledge, the greatest academic excellence that we have been given to. We have to strive back. So the first thing to read is Quran al-Kareem with a deep understanding. The second is Seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. For that we're recommending 2 books. Seeratul Mustafa by Moulana Idris Saab and the Seerah of Nabi alayhi salam by Moulana Abul Hasan Ali al-Nadwi. The third is we're saying read books of hadith. And for this we are giving again 2. One is the Riyadh al-Salihin. The second is the Adab al-Mufrad. Excellent reads of hadith. This doesn't discount anyone else. This is just for somebody that wants to know where do we start from. The third, biographies of people of the past. The Ashara Mubashara. If you just read their stories, you'll fall in love with their achievements. You'll realize how much there is for us to do in terms of work. The people of the past, the giants of Islam, from Salahuddin Ayyubi to Imam Shafi'i to Imam Ghazali to Nuruddin Aibak. There are so many people in Islamic history. Saviors of the Islamic spirit. These in 3 volumes. Excellent if someone wants to read that. And the last thing is that we need to read history to understand what is happening. History of South Africa from an Islamic perspective and otherwise. From every way, knowledge is power. Allah has given us knowledge. Quran had started off with Iqra, read. And in that, with reading and knowledge, Allah had made mention of it 6 times in the first revelation. If we want to achieve anything, we have to go back. Whatever field you are in, if you are doing doctor, become a master at it. Unfortunately, we have become docile recipients of other people's research. Once we start presenting it, once we start fashioning it, once we start creating the narrative, then Muslims will always be in the front. Muslims were always created as leaders. Allah has made us leaders by nature. Islam is a religion that will lead. We just have to follow the course of those that led. Allah will put us on that path. Really, academic excellence is something that we should all strive for. Our children, make sure that they learn optimally. Make sure that they present themselves, whether it be in the school or in the madrasa, to such a level that they excel and become leaders in their field. We as an ummah, we need these leaders to guide us to that which makes Allah happy. Wa akhiru da'wana.